The dim hum of the colony ship's engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that they were light years from anywhere familiar. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles whitening as she scanned the holographic display flickering before her. The ship, Odyssey's Hope, carried the last echoes of humanity's expansion. 5,000 souls frozen in cryopods, dreaming of a new world on Epsilon Eridani. But dreams had a way of fracturing under pressure. Ilara was the steady one, the anchor. At 42, she'd logged more hours in the void than most pilots twice her age, her face etched with lines from too many close calls. She trusted her crew like extensions of herself. Jax, the wiry engineer with a quick laugh that cut through tension. Mira, the xenobiologist whose cautious optimism balanced Jax's impulsiveness. And herself holding the line. No room for more in this skeleton crew. The rest slumbered below, oblivious to the glitch gnawing at the ship's core. Status on the core stabilizers? Ilara asked, her voice level, though her eyes darted to the red warning pulsing on the main screen. The quantum drive was finicky at best, a patchwork of human ingenuity bolted onto alien salvage from the old contact wars. It had gotten them this far, but now it whimpered like a wounded animal. Jax leaned over his console, fingers flying across the interface. Sweat beaded on his brow, but his grin flashed defiant. Holding Cap barely. That power surge from the last jump fried half the relays. If we don't reroute soon, we'll be drifting paperweights. Mira glanced up from her station where she monitored the cryo bays. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, accentuating the furrow in her brow, a telltale sign of her mind racing ahead to worst-case scenarios. And if we reroute wrong? The bays could destabilize. We've got kids in there, Ilara. Families counting on us to not turn this into a tomb. Ilara nodded, absorbing the weight without flinching. The challenge wasn't some distant storm or pirate raid. It was internal, a creeping failure in the heart of their lifeline. Resource shortage didn't begin to cover it. The drive's fuel cells were depleting faster than projected, siphoned by the glitch like blood from a cut. One wrong move, and they'd lose power to everything. Life support, navigation, the very pods preserving their future. The stakes clawed at her gut. Humanity's departure from Sol wasn't just a voyage. It was their redefinition of what power meant, not empires or weapons, but the grit to push through the dark. Jax, isolate the auxiliary feeds. Mira, cross-check the bay integrity. We buy time, then we fix this. Ilara's orders came crisp, her posture unyielding as she rose and strode to the engineering schematic projected mid-bridge. The air recyclers hummed softly, carrying the faint metallic tang of overworked circuits. Jax muttered under his breath, patching lines with a makeshift tool, a fused rod of conductive alloy he jury-rigged from spare parts. Come on, you stubborn beast. A spark jumped, singeing his sleeve, but he pressed on, his wits surfacing in a wry chuckle. If this ship were a person, it'd be me after a bad date, running hot and about to blow. Mira shot him a sidelong glance, her caution manifesting in precise taps on her pad. Focus, Jax. One surge, and those pods thaw unevenly. We wake up to chaos, not a colony. The holographic map spun slowly, stars streaking past like indifferent witnesses. Ilara traced a finger along the power grid, her mind mapping contingencies. They'd planned for asteroids, solar flares, even hypothetical alien encounters, humanity's way, always one step ahead through sheer will. But this? A silent betrayal from their own tech. The first plan, a simple bypass, had backfired during the last diagnostic, amplifying the drain instead of stemming it. Now tension coiled tighter, the bridge feeling smaller, the hum of the engines a ticking clock. As Jax sealed the last connection, the lights dimmed fractionally, eliciting a collective held breath. Ilara's hand hovered over the override, ready to commit. In that moment, the void outside seemed to press in, vast and unforgiving, but her crew's resolve mirrored her own, camaraderie forged in the fire of necessity. They weren't heroes from old tales. They were the ones who kept the lights on, redefining power one desperate fix at a time. The dim hum of the colony ship's engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that they were light years from anywhere that mattered. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles whitening as she scanned the holographic display. The ship, Endurance, had been their ark for 3 generations, humanity's boldest gamble after the Sol system's collapse. But now, with the nearest habitable world still months away, a glitch in the fusion core threatened to unravel everything. Status, Ramirez? Ilara's voice cut through the bridge chatter, steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the cautious one, always double-checking protocols, her gray-streaked hair tied back in a practical knot that mirrored her no-nonsense approach. Ensign Ramirez, the ship's wiry engineer with a perpetual grin that hid his sharp mind, wiped sweat from his brow. Cores fluctuating, cap power draws spiking like we're running a black hole simulator. If we don't isolate it soon, we'll lose auxiliary systems, life support included. Beside her, Dr. Lena Core leaned over the console, her fingers flying across the interface. Lena was the witty counterpart, her dark eyes sparkling with that unshakable optimism that had gotten them through the ration riots back on Luna. Fluctuating? That's engineer speak for, we're about to become a very cold tomb. Any ideas before we all freeze hug? Ramirez shot her a look, half amused, half exasperated. Working on it. The core's old pre-launch mods from the old core. Maybe a feedback loop in the plasma conduits. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. The challenge wasn't just technical, it was survival. With the crew down to 247 souls after the asteroid skirmish with those opportunistic Krell raiders, every loss stung. They couldn't afford downtime. Divert non-essentials. Get a team to the core chamber. I'll lead. Lena raised an eyebrow, her voice light but probing. You? In the guts of the ship? Thought you preferred the bridge, playing chess with stars. Someone has to, Ilara replied, standing with a resolve that masked her unease. She trusted her team, but hesitation now could doom them all. The corridor to the engineering bay felt narrower than usual, emergency lights flickering like hesitant fireflies. Ramirez jogged ahead, toolkit clanging against his thigh, while Lena matched Ilara's stride, her medical kit slung over one shoulder, just in case. As they reached the access hatch, a low groan echoed from the walls, the ship protesting its own strain. Ramirez punched in the override, and the door hissed open to reveal the core chamber. A cavernous space alive with the blue glow of contained plasma, conduits snaking like veins across the bulkheads. But one section sparked erratically, arcs of energy dancing dangerously close to the grated floor. See? Feedback's building, Ramirez said, pointing to a readout on his wrist pad. If it hits critical, the whole core dumps, bye-bye inertia dampeners. We'd smear across the bulkheads like bad abstract art. Lena snorted. Poetic. Now fix it before we test that theory. Ilara scanned the chamber, her cautious instincts kicking in. The initial plan, reroute power through backup relays, seemed solid on paper, but up close the damage looked worse. A microfracture in the primary conduit, probably from that last Krell hit. Start the bypass. I'll monitor from here. Ramirez dove in, his hands a blur as he sealed off sections, but the sparks intensified, a warning whine building. Suddenly, a surge lashed out, slamming into his shoulder. He yelped, stumbling back as the smell of singed fabric filled the air. Ramirez. Ilara lunged forward, grabbing his arm to steady him. The burn was superficial, but the conduit groaned, pressure mounting. Lena was there in an instant, applying a quick sealant from her kit. Hold still, hotshot. That's gonna leave a mark. It's worsening, Ilara said, eyes on the gauges. The bypass was failing. The fracture was propagating, feeding the loop instead of starving it. Their early fix had backfired, accelerating the instability. Alarms blared ship-wide now, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat gone wrong. Ramirez grimaced through the pain. Cap, we need a new play. The old Corp designs had a manual vent, risky, but it could bleed off the excess plasma. Ilara hesitated, weighing the odds. Venting meant exposing the chamber to vacuum for seconds, a gamble with their lives. But staying put meant the core would take the ship with it. Do it. Lena, cover him. I'll handle the overrides. As Ramirez crawled toward the vent controls, Ilara's fingers danced over the panel, her caution giving way to grit. The ship shuddered, a deep tremor that rattled their teeth. Plasma hissed, building to a roar. Come on, you stubborn beast, Ramirez muttered, wrench twisting against the valve. In that moment, under the flickering lights, their camaraderie shone. Ilara's steady command, Lena's quick quips masking worry, Ramirez's ingenuity pushing through pain. The vent cracked open, and with a deafening whoosh the excess energy vented into space, the chamber decompressing in a controlled burst. Seals engaged just in time, the hum stabilizing to a reassuring thrum. They slumped against the bulkheads, breaths ragged, the air thick with ozone. "Nice save," Lena said, clapping Ramirez on the good shoulder. "But next time, let's not make it a team-building exercise." Ilera allowed a small smile, but her eyes lingered on the patched conduit. The fix held, for now, but the core's fragility was a stark warning. Captain Ilera Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as the stars blurred past the viewport. The hum of the Odyssey's engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that they were hurtling away from Sol at speeds no human ship had dared before. Beside her Dr. Kai Rin leaned against the console, his fingers dancing over a holographic display, tracing the anomaly that had just pinged their sensors. "It's not a glitch," he muttered, his voice steady but edged with the caution that defined him. "The readings are spiking, gravitational distortions like nothing in the archives." Lieutenant Mira Thorne paced behind them, her steps sharp with urgency. Boots thudding softly, the only sound breaking the tension. Brave to a fault, she never stayed still when uncertainty loomed. "If it's a wormhole or some alien trap, we pivot. We've got the shields." Her words carried the grit of someone who'd stared down pirate fleets in the outer colonies, but even she glanced at the viewport, where the void seemed to press in closer. Ilera turned, her sharp eyes, honed from years commanding ragtag refugee convoys, fixing on Kai. "Run the sims again. We can't afford another false start like Vega." The memory hung unspoken. Their first jump, sabotaged by faulty NAV core, stranding them for weeks in a debris field. Resources were already thinning, water recyclers at 78% efficiency, protein synths rationed to 2 meals a day. One more delay and the crew's morale, fragile as it was, might crack. Kai nodded, his witty retort dying on his lips as the alarms blared. Red lights strobed across the deck, casting jagged shadows. "Incoming!" Mira shouted, lunging for the comms panel. The ship lurched, inertial dampeners straining as an unseen force tugged at their hull. Ilera braced, tasting the metallic tang of fear, but her voice cut through the chaos. "All hands, battle stations. Kai, isolate the source." The hologram flickered, resolving into a swirling vortex ahead. Not natural but engineered. Jagged spires of energy pulsed within, like the maw of some colossal beast. Kai's face paled. "It's a blockade. Xeno signatures, Krell design. They're not letting us through." The Krell, ancient rivals of humanity's expansion, guardians of the core routes. Whispers in the colony spoke of their intolerance for lesser species venturing beyond the fringe. Myra's hand hovered over the weapons console. "We fight." Her question was a spark, ready to ignite. Ilera shook her head, mind racing through options. Blasting through would drain their power reserves, leaving them vulnerable to the long haul ahead. "No. We adapt." She tapped her earpiece. "Engineering, reroute auxiliary power to the grav drive. Kai, mod the emitters, make us look like a derelict probe. Buy us time." As the crew scrambled, the ship shuddered again, the vortex's pull intensifying. A single Krell interceptor materialized on the edge of the display, its sleek form dwarfing the Odyssey like a shark eyeing minnows. Ilera watched, heart pounding, as Kai worked furiously, sweat beading on his brow. The plan was risky, too much power draw could fry the core, but it was theirs, born of human cunning in the face of overwhelming odds. The interceptor closed in, scanning beams lancing out. Mira held her breath, fist clenched. Then, silence. The enemy vessel paused, its signature flickering with confusion. Kai grinned faintly. "They're buying it." Drift pattern engaged. Ilera exhaled, but the relief was short-lived. The vortex churned wider, revealing a fleet beyond, dozens of Krell ships, blockading the jump lane humanity needed to reach the uncharted sectors. Departure from Sol had been hard enough. This was the true test. Helm, plot an evasive arc. We skirt the edge, find a weak point. As the Odyssey veered, engines whining, she felt the weight of it all. The colonists in cryo below, dreaming of new worlds, unaware of the gauntlet ahead. In the dim glow of the bridge, the three of them stood united, the stars their only witness. The blockade loomed, a wall of alien might, but Ilara's resolve hardened. Humanity's ingenuity had carved empires from asteroids. It would punch through this too, even if it cost them dearly. Elena gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with stars streaking past, but her focus was on the diagnostic panel blinking red. "Marco, talk to me. What's the damage from that micrometeor hit?" Marco wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over the engineering console. Tools clattered in his belt as he leaned in, eyes narrowing at the schematics. "It's the auxiliary power relays, Captain. Fried clean through. We're losing efficiency in the life support grid, nothing catastrophic yet, but if we push the engines harder we'll start rationing oxygen by morning." Lila hovered behind him, her cautious gaze flicking between readouts and the viewport where the asteroid belt loomed like jagged teeth. She adjusted her glasses, voice steady but edged with worry. "We can't afford to drift. The colony ship's convoy is 2 days out, and without full power we'll miss the rendezvous window. One wrong maneuver and we're debris." Elena nodded, her mind racing through options. The cabin smelled of ozone and recycled air, a reminder of how fragile their bubble of survival was. Humanity's great departure from a scorched Earth had launched with fanfare, thousands of arcs carrying the remnants of civilization to new worlds. But out here it was just their scout vessel, the Vanguard, charting safe paths through the void. No fanfare now, only the weight of responsibility. "Options?" Elena asked, standing to pace the short length of the bridge. Her boots thudded softly against the grated floor. Marco grinned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "We improvise like always. I can reroute from the secondary batteries, but it'll mean dimming non-essentials. Lights, heat, the works. Or we vent the forward thrusters for a quick boost, but that risks destabilizing the hull." Lila shook her head. "Venting's too unpredictable. Remember The Sims? One bad seal and we're exposed to vacuum." She pulled up a holographic model, rotating it with a swipe. The ship glowed blue, red lines snaking through the power grid like wounds. "What if we use the emergency fusion initiator? It's meant for blackouts, but jury-rigging it to the relays could buy us time." Marco paused, then snapped his fingers. "That's not half bad, document risky, but humans didn't get this far by playing safe." He grabbed a toolkit, already moving toward the access hatch. "Give me 20 minutes. Elena, keep us steady, no heroics." She watched him disappear into the bowels of the ship, the hatch sealing with a hiss. Lila slid into the co-pilot seat, her hands hovering over the controls. "You trust him not to blow us up?" "With my life," Elena replied, settling back. But doubt gnawed at her. The belt was closing in, rocks tumbling like slow-motion boulders. A small one pinged off the shields, the ship shuddering lightly. If Marco's fix failed, the cost would be them, 3 lives snuffed out in the dark, delaying the fleet and stranding thousands more. The lights dimmed as Marco worked, casting long shadows across the console. Elena's breath came shorter, the air recyclers whining under strain. "Status?" she called into the intercom. "Relays are hot, initiators bridging the gap," Marco's voice crackled back, laced with strain. "Almost, got it." A jolt rocked the ship, alarms blaring for a split second before silencing. Power surged, the view screen brightening as engines purred back to full. Marco emerged, face smudged with grease, grinning. "We're golden. But the initiator's one use now. No more safety nets." Lila exhaled, leaning back. "Close. Too close." Elena steered them clear of the belt, the stars steadying. The fix held, but the lingering flicker in the grid whispered of vulnerabilities ahead. Their departure wasn't just escape, it was a test of what humans could endure, one patched relay at a time. The dim hum of the auxiliary generators echoed through the engineering bay like a distant heartbeat, faltering now and then as if the ship itself were gasping for air. Marco wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. He glanced at the diagnostic panel, its holographic display flickering with red warnings, power reserves at 23%, structural integrity holding by threads thinner than spider silk. "Come on, you stubborn beast," he muttered, prying open another conduit with a toolkit that felt heavier than it should. Elena stepped in from the corridor, her boots clanging against the grated floor. She carried the weight of command in her squared shoulders, but her eyes betrayed the exhaustion that came from 3 sleepless shifts. Status Marco? The council's breathing down my neck. If we don't stabilize the core by the next jump, we're dead in the void. He didn't look up, twisting a valve with practiced fury. Worse than that, Cap. The quantum flux is inverting, it's like the engine's fighting itself. My patch on the relays bought us time, but that last surge fried half the backups. We're one bad ripple from cascading failure. His voice carried that wry edge, the kind that masked fear with humor. Think of it as the universe's way of saying not today. Lena hovered at the doorway, her tablet clutched like a shield, data streams scrolling across its surface. Cautious as ever, she adjusted her glasses, peering at the readouts over Marco's shoulder. The models predict a 47% chance of containment breach if we push the engines now. We should vent the excess heat into space by a cycle to recalibrate. Her words were measured, each one a careful step on uncertain ground. Elena shook her head, pacing the narrow space. The bay smelled of ozone and molten metal, a sharp reminder of how close they'd come already. Outside the viewport, the stars blurred into streaks, the Ark ship's desperate velocity carrying them toward the uncharted frontier. Humanity's great departure. Thousands of souls packed into this colossal vessel, fleeing a dying Earth, had seemed like triumph at launch. Now it felt like a gamble with loaded dice. Venting's not an option, Elena said firmly. Scanners picked up that anomaly ahead, some kind of gravitational shear. If we slow, it catches us. Rips the hull like paper. She stopped, meeting Marco's gaze. What if we reroute the auxiliary power through the habitat rings? Use the colonists' life support as a buffer. Marco paused, his wrench hovering. The idea sparked something in his eyes, a glint of that human spark, the one that turned desperation into defiance. Risky. The rings'll go dark for hours. People wake up cold, maybe worse if the O2 dips. But he was already pulling up schematics, fingers dancing over the console. Lena leaned in, her caution warring with necessity as she cross-checked the flows. As they worked, a low groan rippled through the deck plating. Alarms blared, another fluctuation. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, and Elena lunged, shoving Lena clear just as a shower of debris rained down. Marco cursed, smothering a small fire with his jacket. That's the shear's edge grazing us. We're too close. The plan took shape in frantic bursts. Elena coordinating overrides from the bridge, her voice steady over comms as she rallied the minimal crew. Marco jury-rigged the reroute, sweat stinging his eyes, while Lena monitored the tolerances, her calculations a lifeline in the chaos. But as the first surge hit, the habitat feeds buckled. Lights dimmed across the ship, cries echoing faintly through the vents from below. It's holding barely, Marco grunted, sealing the final connection. The core stabilized, a triumphant pulse vibrating under their feet. They exchanged nods, the camaraderie forged in fire, but Elena's comlink crackled with reports. Minor injuries in the rings, a child lost in the panic. The cost lingered, a shadow on their hard-won breath. Pushing forward, the Ark plunged deeper into the shear, the stars twisting like threads in a loom. Power redefined, not in raw force but in the grit to bend it to will. Yet as the anomaly loomed larger, Elena wondered if their ingenuity would outpace the void's hunger. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the bulkheads, a constant reminder that the Odyssey was limping, not soaring. Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The view screen flickered with starlight, but the real stars of concern were the readouts scrolling across her console. Power reserves at 23%, hull integrity holding at 87%, and the gravitational pull of the Sol system's outer debris field tugging harder than predicted. They had punched through the initial Exodus wave 2 days ago, but now with the rival Krell fleet shadowing their flank, every inefficiency felt like a betrayal. Captain, the jury-rigged fusion core is spiking again, Marco called from the engineering pit below, his voice cutting through the bridge chatter like a plasma cutter. He wiped sweat from his brow, his usual smirk absent as he hunched over a tangle of exposed conduits. Wires snaked around his boots like vines, and the acrid scent of overheating circuits hung in the air. We're bleeding energy faster than a punctured suit. If we don't vent the excess heat soon, it'll cascade into the main drive. Elena nodded, her jaw set. Brave didn't mean reckless, it meant choices under fire. She glanced at Lila, who stood at the sensor station, her fingers dancing over holographic displays. The scientist's eyes, sharp behind her glasses, darted between data streams, her cautious nature etched in the way she bit her lip before speaking. "The debris field's denser than our models suggested," Lila said, her tone measured as if weighing each word against the void outside. "Pushing through at current thrust risks collision. But diverting power to shields leaves us blind to the Krell. They've been jamming our long-range scans since the skirmish at Lagrange Point 4. The Krell. Not an empire of shadows, but a consortium of resource-hoarding aliens who'd claimed the Exodus routes as their tollway. Their ships, sleek and predatory, had already claimed 2 human arcs in the chaos of departure. Humanity's grit had bought them time, clever EMP bursts from improvised drones, but the cost was mounting. Families separated, colonies abandoned mid-evacuation. Elena felt the weight of it in her chest, the unspoken promise to the 1,000 souls in cryo below. "We get through this or we don't." "Options?" Elena asked, her voice steady, pulling the team into focus. No speeches, just the raw edge of decision. Marco straightened, coiling a loose cable with deliberate twists. "We could repurpose the cryocoolant lines, route them through the exhaust vents. It's a hack, but it'd buy us thermal stability. Risk is, if it backfires we lose pod integrity. Folks wake up to a deep freeze party they didn't RSVP for." Lila shook her head, projections flickering across her face. "Too volatile. The field's pulling us off vector already. Better to microjump. Short bursts to skirt the dense pockets. But that drains the reserves faster, and the Krell will close the gap." Elena leaned forward, the chair creaking under her. The bridge lights cast long shadows, turning Marco's grease-streaked face into a map of determination, Lila's into quiet resolve. They weren't heroes from old vids. They were the ones who fixed leaks and rerouted power when the galaxy didn't care. Marco prepped the coolant reroute. "Lila, plot the jump sequence, tighten it as much as you can. We'll dance with the debris if we have to." As Marco dove back into the pit, tools clanging, Elena watched the view screen. A chunk of asteroid tumbled into view, its surface pitted like forgotten regrets. The first jump initiated with a shudder, the ship groaning as it slipped sideways. Alarms blared, hull stress at 92%, but they cleared the pocket, emerging into clearer space. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the whir of stabilizing gyros. Then Lila's console lit up. Krell's signatures inbound, closing fast. "They're adapting to our pattern." Marco's laugh barked from below, wry and unyielding. "Adapting? Lechintrai. I've got one more trick up my sleeve, old Earth tech, the kind they never saw coming." Elena allowed herself a thin smile, the tension coiling tighter. The Odyssey pressed on, a fragile spark against the endless night, its crew weaving survival from scraps. But as the Krell's shadows lengthened, the true test loomed, not just escape but what power they could forge from the breaking. The dim glow of the auxiliary lights flickered across the command deck, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the edge of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The alien vessel, a colossal behemoth from the Zorathian fleet, loomed in the viewscreen, its energy shields pulsing with an otherworldly blue hue. They had evaded detection for hours, but now the trap had snapped shut. "Status on the warp core?" she barked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Engineer Tomas Riley wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over the holographic interface. "It's holding, Cap, but barely. That last micro-jump fried half the stabilizers. If we push her again we might tear the ship apart." He was the cautious one, always calculating risks, but even he couldn't hide the edge of fear in his tone. Beside him, Lieutenant Kira Novak leaned in, her sharp eyes scanning the readouts. The witty xenolinguist turned tactical officer had a knack for turning desperation into opportunity, but right now her usual quips were silenced by the blaring proximity alarms. The Zorathians weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were harvesters, stripping worlds of their essence to fuel their endless expansion. Humanity's departure from Sol, evacuating billions as the sun destabilized, had caught them off guard. The Exodus fleet, a ragtag armada of repurposed colony ships, had become a symbol of defiance. But this lone scout vessel, the Endeavour, was light years from the main convoy, on a desperate run to deliver the prototype power core that could redefine interstellar travel. Lose it and the fleet's hopes died with them. Options? Elena asked, swiveling to face her crew. The deck hummed with the strain of failing systems, air recyclers wheezing like an old man's breath. Kira straightened, her mind racing. Their shields are adaptive, they modulate against energy weapons. But we've got that gravitic disruptor from the R&D labs. It's untested, but if we sync it with the core's output. She trailed off, glancing at Tomas for confirmation. He nodded grimly. Could work. Overload their shield harmonics, create a feedback loop. But it'll drain our reserves. We might not have enough juice to jump after. Elena waited, the weight of the fleet pressing on her shoulders. No speeches, no dramatics, just the raw math of survival. Do it. Tomas, reroute power. Kira, target their shield emitters. I'll take the con. As Tomas dove into the wiring, sparks flying from exposed panels, Kira plotted the firing solution. The Endeavour shuddered, inertial dampeners straining as Elena banked hard, dodging a probing energy lance that scorched the hull. The disruptor hummed to life, a low thrum building in the deck plates. On the view screen, the Zorathian ship fired back, but the shot glanced off their improvised armor, human scrap welded with alien salvage. Disruptor locked, Kira announced, her voice taut. Firing. A ripple of distorted space erupted from the Endeavour's ventral array, slamming into the enemy shields. The blue field warped, then inverted, arcs of plasma lancing back at the Zorathian hull. Alarms wailed on their side as secondary explosions rocked the alien vessel, but the feedback hit the Endeavour too, a power surge that blacked out half the lights. Cores spiking. Tomas yelled, slamming emergency overrides. Elena fought the controls, the ship bucking like a wild stallion. Through the chaos, a transmission crackled over the comms, not Zorathian but distorted human voices from the fleet's edge. Reinforcements? Or a trap? The Zorathian ship listed, its shields collapsing in a shower of debris, but it wasn't done. A boarding pod launched, streaking toward them. Elena's jaw set. Seal the bays. We're not losing this core, not after everything. In the engine room below, Tomas jury-rigged a containment field, his hands trembling but precise. Kira, rerouting weapons from the bridge, patched through a message, "Hold the line. The fleet's en route." But as the pod latched onto their hull with a metallic screech, Elena knew the real fight was just beginning. The power core pulsed in its cradle, a beacon of humanity's unyielding spark, demanding they protect it at all costs. One breach, one mistake, and the departure that redefined power would end in silence. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the bulkheads of the Odyssey, a constant reminder that the ship's heart was faltering. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles whitening as she scanned the holographic display. Red alerts blinked like angry eyes. Fuel cells at 23%, structural integrity holding at 78% after the last micrometeoroid barrage. Beside her, Engineer Raj Patel wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over a portable console. "We're bleeding plasma, Captain. If we don't seal the rupture in the forward nacelle, we'll be drifting debris in an hour." Across the bridge, Lieutenant Kira Novak leaned against the navigation station, her sharp eyes narrowing at the starfield outside. She'd always been the cautious one, the voice urging double checks, but now her caution bordered on paralysis. "Pushing the engines harder will only accelerate the leak," she said, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "We reroute power from life support? By time to hail the Alliance fleet." Elena shook her head, the weight of command pressing like an unseen hand. The Alliance, those sleek, energy-manipulating aliens who'd promised partnership when humanity announced its exodus from a dying sol system, had gone silent hours ago. No response to the distress beacon, no escort ships materializing from the void. Just the cold expanse of the Perseus Arm, where the Odyssey carried the last 5,000 souls betting on a new world. The challenge wasn't just mechanical, it was existential. One wrong move, and humanity's bold departure became a forgotten tomb. Raj snorted, not unkindly, as he patched in a diagnostic. "Life support's already rationed. Dim the lights, cut the recyclers, people will panic." We've got the jury-rigged fusion tap from the cargo bay, but it's unstable. One surge and it fries the whole grid. He was the optimist, the one who jury-rigged half the ship's redundancies back on Earth with nothing but grit and scavenged parts. His hands, calloused from years in the yards, moved with a wiry precision that belied the exhaustion in his eyes. Kira pushed off the console, pacing the narrow bridge. Then we adapt. Remember The Sims? Vent the excess heat through the auxiliary vents, use the momentum to slingshot around that gas giant ahead. It won't fix the leak, but it'll get us to the relay station. Her plan was solid, born of her meticulous drills, but Elena saw the flaw. The giant's gravity well was unpredictable, laced with radiation belts that could cook the hull. Elena rose, her boots magnetized to the deck with a faint click. She'd led mining ops on Mars, stared down corporate overlords, but this, humanity's fragile ark hanging by threads of alloy and code, tested her resolve. Raj prepped the vent sequence. Kira plot the trajectory. But if it backfires, we're committing to the drift. The words hung heavy, a tacit admission of the cost. Potential loss of the forward labs where cryosleep pods held the genetic banks. No labs, no rebirth on New Horizon. As Raj nodded and dove back into his work, a low groan echoed from the ship, metal protesting under strain. Alarms wailed briefly before Kira silenced them. The holographic display flickered, showing the gas giant swelling like a bruised marble against the stars. Elena felt the pull in her gut, not just gravity but the inexorable truth. Power wasn't in the engines or the Alliance's ethereal tech. It was in these moments humans refusing to yield. The maneuver began with a shudder, the Odyssey twisting like a wounded beast. Plasma vented in azure streaks, illuminating the bridge in ghostly light. Raj's console sparked once, his face illuminated by the flare as he barked adjustments. Holding, barely. Kira's fingers danced on the controls, her breath coming in measured bursts. Tension coiled, the ship groaning louder, rivets straining. Then, a jolt, harder than expected. The deck tilted, gravity fluctuating as the slingshot took hold. Elena braced, watching the display, trajectory aligning, but the nacelles rupture widened, spewing more fuel into the void. They were gaining speed, yes, but at the price of tomorrow's margin. The relay station loomed in the projections, a faint beacon 0.2 light-years out. Close enough to taste salvation, far enough to doubt. As the ship stabilized, Kira exhaled, slumping slightly. We made it through the belt. Radiation's minimal. But her eyes met Elena's, shadowed with the unspoken. The genetic banks had taken a hit, sensors reading fluctuating cryotemps. Not catastrophic, but a scar on their future. Raj leaned back, grinning faintly through the grime. Humanity's departure redefined. We're not just surviving, we're rewriting the rules. Elena allowed a nod, the camaraderie a brief warmth against the chill. But the lingering consequence whispered in the engine's faltering hum. Power deferred, not denied, with debts yet to pay. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold metal. The stars streaked past like fleeting promises, but the ship's hum felt off, deeper, labored, as if the engines were gasping for air. Marco was already at the console, his fingers dancing over holographic displays, muttering curses in Italian that even she could pick up. The core's destabilizing again, he said, not looking up. That jury-rigged bypass we pulled off Vesta Station? It's holding but barely. One more surge and we're venting plasma into the void. Lila hovered nearby, her tablet clutched like a shield, eyes scanning readouts that painted a grim picture. She was the cautious one, always double-checking, but now her voice carried an edge of frustration. We should have waited for the Alliance repairs. Pushing the full drive like this, it's not just risky, it's suicidal. The quantum fluctuations could rip us apart before we even reached the rendezvous point. Elena shot her a glance, the kind that said they didn't have the luxury of what-ifs. The departure from Sol had been hasty, driven by the whispers of the Caliph fleet closing in, their blockade turning humanity's exodus into a desperate sprint. The alert klaxons blared suddenly, red lights pulsing across the deck. Marco slammed a fist on the panel. There it is. Overload in Sector 7. If we don't vent the excess now, it'll chain react through the whole system. Elena's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of their plan. They'd adapted the old human fusion tech, blending it with scavenged alien components to squeeze out extra jumps. Ingenuity born of necessity, the kind that had kept their ancestors alive through worse. But this was the backfire they'd feared. Options, she demanded, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Marco straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, a wry grin cracking his tension. We could dump the auxiliary power cells, lose our shields but buy time to reroute. Or... He trailed off, eyes flicking to Lila. She shook her head. No. The cells are all we've got left for life support after the last skirmish. Vent them and half the crew freezes before we hit the next system. The ship shuddered, a deep groan echoing through the hull, and Elena felt the deck tilt slightly underfoot, a stark reminder that space didn't forgive hesitation. She pushed off the railing, striding to the central holomap where the glowing arc of their trajectory intersected with the encroaching Calith signatures. Red blips swarmed like angry hornets, closing the gap faster than predicted. The challenge wasn't just mechanical, it was the aliens' relentless pursuit, their superior numbers turning every fold jump into a gamble. Humanity's departure was supposed to redefine power, not through brute force but through grit, through refusing to break. Yet here with the drive failing, that ideal felt fragile. Marco, isolate the search. Lila, run simulations on a manual override. We adapt or we die. As they worked, sparks flew from a nearby conduit, casting flickering shadows that danced across their faces. Marco jury-rigged a stabilizer with nothing but a plasma torch and salvaged wiring, his hands steady despite the risk of shock. Remember that hauler on Titan? He quipped, voice light but eyes focused. We turned a scrapyard into a fortress. This is just another Tuesday. Lila snorted, her fingers blurring over the tablet. Tuesday with a side of extinction. Elena watched them, the camaraderie a quiet anchor amid the chaos. But deep down she knew the cost. If this failed, the lingering consequence would be etched in the stars, humanity's light snuffed out, not with a bang but a whimper of overloaded circuits. The ship lurched again, harder this time, and Elena braced against the console. Alarms wailed, but Marco's voice cut through. Got it, reroute engaged. We're stable for now. Lila nodded grimly, pulling up the new trajectory. It'll shave 2 jumps off our path but we'll arrive with minimal reserves. The Calith will be waiting. Elena exhaled, the tension easing just a fraction. They'd bought time, turned failure into a pivot, but the stakes loomed larger. Power wasn't in the engines or the weapons, it was in this, humans bending the universe to their will, one desperate fix at a time. Captain Elara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold metal. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks as the Ark's engines pushed harder, but the hum felt wrong, thinner, like a voice straining to be heard. Below, in the engineering bays, her team was a frenzy of motion, but up here the weight of command settled like dust after a storm. Status, Reyes? She called into her calm voice, steady despite the knot in her gut. Lieutenant Marco Reyes's reply crackled through, laced with exhaustion. Fusion cores holding at 60%, Captain. But the quantum relays are fritzing again. If we don't reroute soon, we'll lose auxiliary power to life support. Elara nodded to herself, eyes tracing the holographic display flickering on the bulkhead. The anomaly they'd skirted, the one that had claimed the scout probes, had left its mark, invisible tendrils gnawing at their systems. No alien sabotage, just the universe's indifference, a gravitational shear that twisted energy flows like wet rope. They'd adapted before, patching with human grit and scavenged parts, but this felt deeper, a threat that could unravel everything they'd built since leaving Sol. She turned to Dr. Lena Kaur, the physicist who'd become their unofficial oracle, her wiry frame hunched over a tablet. Lena's dark eyes flicked up, sharp and unyielding. The math checks out, she said, tapping the screen. We overload the secondary coils to bridge the gap. Risky, but it buys us the jump to the relay point. Risky how? Elara pressed, though she already knew. Lena never sugar-coated. Could cascade. Fry the whole grid if the shear hits wrong. But sitting here? We're dead anyway. Power defines us now, without it the Ark's just a tomb drifting cold. Elara's mind raced through the faces below. Families huddled in cryopods, engineers like Reyes who'd traded their youth for this exodus, the children who'd never touch Earth's soil. Humanity's departure wasn't glory, It was survival redefined by every jury-rigged fix and desperate choice. She straightened. Do it. Alert the crew, evac protocols if it goes south. The deck vibrated as they descended to engineering, the air thick with ozone and sweat. Reyes met them at the hatch, his usual wit dulled by fatigue, grease streaking his face like war paint. "Captain on deck," he muttered, forcing a grin. Just in time for the fireworks. Lena dove into the console, fingers flying across the interfaces, while Ilara helped Reyes haul the manual overrides into position. The core loomed ahead, a throbbing heart of plasma and steel, its lights pulsing erratically. Alarms blared softly, a warning chorus. "Initiating surge," Lena announced. The ship groaned, metal protesting as energy flooded the lines. Ilara held her breath, watching the readouts spike. For a heartbeat, stability held. The relays snapped back online, power surging through the veins of the Arkansas. Then the sheer hit. It came as a ripple, invisible but felt in the bones. A shudder that buckled panels and sent sparks dancing across the floor. Reyes cursed, lunging for a loose conduit, his hands burning but unyielding. "Hold it!" Ilara shouted, diving to assist, her shoulder slamming into his as they wrestled the breach sealed. Lena's voice cut through the chaos. "Diverting now, come on you beautiful beast." The holograph flared, lines of code twisting like vines, then settling. The hum deepened, steadying. The alarms fell silent. They slumped against the bulkhead, breaths ragged. Reyes wiped his brow, chuckling weakly. "Told you fireworks. But we didn't blow up. That's something." Ilara scanned the readouts, 75% and climbing. The jump was viable now, the relay point within reach. But the cost lingered. Scorched relays that would need months to repair, a reminder that power wasn't infinite, not out here. Lena met her gaze, a nod passing between them, earned, unspoken. As the arc accelerated, Ilara felt the shift. Humanity's departure had forged them anew, not through conquest but through these fragile triumphs. The stars ahead weren't conquerors. They were home, waiting to be claimed one fix at a time. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that the Odyssey's main drive was still offline. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles white against the worn metal. Her crew, 3 souls she'd handpicked for this exodus, huddled around the flickering holographic display. There was Marcus, the engineer with his perpetual grease-streaked brow and unyielding optimism. Lila, the xenobiologist whose sharp eyes missed nothing, even now scanning the alien signatures closing in. And Theo, the pilot, fingers dancing over controls like he was coaxing a wild animal. "They're gaining," Theo said, his voice steady but edged with the strain of the last 12 hours. The pursuing fleet, remnants of the Krell Dominion, those tentacled overlords who'd claimed half the galaxy as their birthright, had locked onto their trail the moment the wormhole collapsed. Humanity's departure from Sol wasn't just a flight, it was a declaration, a desperate leap to seed new worlds before the Dominion crushed the cradle of human grit underfoot. Elena nodded, her jaw set. She'd always been the cautious one, the planner who weighed every variable, but caution had burned away in the fire of necessity. Status on the jury-rigged shield? Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, not looking up from his tablet. Holding at 47%. The plasma conduits are overheating, another hit like the last and will vent atmosphere. He patched in a schematic, the lines glowing erratic red. The Krell weapons weren't brute force. They were precision strikes designed to cripple without destroying, to capture and dissect the primitive humans who dared innovate beyond their scripted fate. Lila leaned in, her braids swinging as she traced a finger over the sensor read. Their lead ship's broadcasting again. Same demand, surrender the core tech or be boarded. She glanced at Elena, her wit dulled by exhaustion but still flickering. As if we'd hand over the fusion lattice that got us this far. It's not just power, it's proof we don't need their scraps. The bridge shuddered under another volley, lights flickering as emergency protocols kicked in. Theo banked hard, stars streaking across the viewport in a blur of evasion. Incoming torpedoes, evasive pattern delta. His hands flew, the ship groaning in protest, but the torpedoes clipped the rear nacelle, sending sparks dancing across the bulkhead. Elena straightened, mind racing through the fragments of their failed plan. The initial warp jump had backfired spectacularly, stranding them in this nebula's edge, where the Krell could pick them off like insects. But humans didn't yield to inevitability. Marcus, divert auxiliary power to the forward arrays. Lila, isolate the Dominion's comm signature. Can we spoof it? Marcus's eyes lit up, the engineer's spark igniting. Spoof? Like bouncing their own signal back at them? He dove into the code, fingers blurring over the interface. Lila nodded, pulling up the Xenofrec pattern she'd memorized from months of covert scans. It's erratic, but their protocols are rigid. If we mimic their handshake. A proximity alarm wailed, the Krell boarding drones launching in a swarm, their iridescent hulls glinting like predatory fish. Theo's maneuvers bought seconds, but the drones latched onto the hull with magnetic claws, cutting through the outer plating. Elena felt the deck tilt, the air growing thick with the scent of ozone. They're in the cargo bay. Seal it off. But it was too late for clean separation. The comms crackled to life, a guttural translation filtering through. Primitives, your ingenuity ends here. Yield the lattice or we claim your vessel. Elena's response was a grim smile, born of the camaraderie that had forged them through the soul evacuation's chaos. Theo prepped a decoy drone. Marcus, route the lattice's output through it, make it look like the real prize. As the team scrambled, she watched the hologram. The Krell closing, their formation impeccable, unaware that human adaptation thrived on the brink. The boarding klaxons blared louder, boots thudding in the corridors below. Lila patched the spoof into the array, her voice a whisper of tension. Transmitting. If this works, they'll chase ghosts. Marcus sealed the lattice transfer, the core's hum shifting pitch, a low growl of redirected energy. Theo launched the decoy, a makeshift pod pulsing with fabricated signatures. On the display, the Krell hesitated, their lead ship veering toward the lure. But one drone breached the inner hatch, its laser cutter whining against the door. Elena grabbed a pulse rifle from the locker, the weight familiar from training sims she'd run 1,000 times. Hold the bridge. We've bought time, now we use it. As the door buckled, Marcus hefted a toolkit like a weapon, Lila priming a stun grenade. The air crackled with resolve, the Odyssey fighting not just for survival, but for the legacy of a species that redefined power not through dominance but defiance. The nebula's glow framed them, a canvas for the final push, where one clever twist could turn hunters into the hunted. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console, her knuckles white against the humming interface. The bridge of the Odyssey thrummed with the low growl of overtaxed engines, every vibration a reminder of how close they'd come to unraveling. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren leaned forward, his eyes scanning the final readouts, fingers dancing over holographic displays that flickered like dying stars. In the co-pilot seat, Mira Solis, the wiry engineer with a perpetual grease smudge on her cheek, punched in the last sequence, her breath coming in sharp bursts. Power cores holding at 87%, Mira said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. But if we don't sync the departure vector now, the warp field collapses. Everything we've jury-rigged goes critical. Ilara nodded, her jaw set. The external challenge had been the solar flare storm, unpredictable bursts from the dying sun that had fried half their systems on the approach to the exodus point. It wasn't some rival fleet or ancient curse, just the raw indifference of a star winding down, threatening to strand the last remnants of humanity on a scorched earth. They'd lost 2 shuttles already, and the colony ship behind them carried 1 million souls counting on this jump. Kai straightened, his cautious nature giving way to a rare spark of optimism. The human matrix is stable. We've woven the auxiliary reactors into the main grid. It's unorthodox, but the simulations held. One push and we're through. The plan from hours ago had backfired spectacularly. Their initial bypass of the flare interference had overloaded the shields, forcing an emergency vent that nearly vented the atmosphere. Ilara had rallied them then, her bravery shining through as she manually sealed the breach, blood from a gash on her arm mixing with the frost on the bulkhead. Now, with the stakes etched into their bones, they adapted. Myra's clever rerouting of the waste heat exchangers into a makeshift buffer had bought them this window, a gritty testament to human grit. Alarms blared, a fresh flare incoming, the view screen blooming with plasma fire. Ilara's hand hovered over the initiation key. On my mark. Kai, monitor the colony link. Mira, keep that core singing. Mark, she said, slamming the key down. The ship shuddered, reality folding around them like crumpled foil. Kai's voice cut through the groan of metal. Warp initiating, 70%, 85. A jolt rocked the bridge, sparks flying from a panel. Mira cursed, diving under the console to yank a loose conduit. Got it, rerouting now. Elara felt the pull, a deep ache in her chest as the Odyssey tore free of the solar system's grasp. The flare washed over them, muted now by their human-forged shield of ingenuity, recycled alloys, patched wiring, and sheer will. The view screen cleared, stars streaking into the familiar blur of faster-than-light travel. Kai exhaled, slumping back. Link secure. Colony ships following. We're clear. Mira emerged, grinning through the grime. Told you my hack job would hold. But we're down to one backup reactor. No more close calls like that. Elara allowed herself a breath, the tension easing like a knot finally loosening. The departure wasn't triumphant fanfare. It was this, 3 souls, battered but unbroken, carrying humanity's spark to a new horizon. Power wasn't in weapons or empires, it was in the quiet adaptations, the camaraderie that turned disaster into dawn. As the stars stabilized ahead, a new galaxy waiting, Elara knew the cost lingered. A home left behind, forever changed, but their redefined strength propelling them forward.